You wanted the best. You've got the best podcast. The hottest podcast in the world. The Chris Voss Show. The preeminent podcast with guests so smart you may experience serious brain bleed. The CEOs, authors, thought leaders, visionaries, and motivators. Get ready. Strap yourself in. Keep your hands, arms, and legs inside the vehicle at all times, because you're about to go on a monster education roller coaster with your brain. Now, here's your host, Chris Voss.
Boy, that's getting edited. Hi, folks. Chris Voss here from thechrisvossshow.com, the chrisvossshow.com. Welcome to the big show there, folks. Hey, welcome to the big show. We certainly appreciate you guys coming by. Thanks for tuning in, as always. You guys are the brightest and best audience in the world. Have I ever told you that? Have I ever kissed up enough to you? You guys are. And don't let anybody ever convince you otherwise. If you meet people and they go, you are not the best audience in the world, just look at them funny and ignore them and keep moving. So there you go. We certainly appreciate you guys coming by. And the best way to be one of the best audience members of the guest is not only to laugh, enjoy the show, bathe in the brilliance of the show, the intelligence, because when you bathe and take in the brilliant authors, the minds that are on the Chris Voss Show, none of them are rich me. That's why we have guests that are brilliant. When you bathe that in, you become a better person, a richer person, a person of intelligence, and all that good stuff. And when you do, you are sexier to the whoever you want to attract into your life. So there you go. So make yourself sexier, or at least intelligent, because if you're intelligent, you can navigate life better. Can I sell this any harder? I don't know.
That's funny.
So this is the game we play. Anyway, guys, welcome to the show. We certainly appreciate it. As always, refer the show to your family, friends, and relatives so you can get more of that bathing sexiness. YouTube.com/Chris Voss. What else is there? Goodreads.com/Chris Voss. LinkedIn.com/Chris Voss. We're trying to be cool over there on the TikTok, and it's not working. So go over there and, I don't know, tell us how not cool we are, but at least follow the channel. Today we have another amazing mind, author, brilliant book that she's written on the show. As always, we have the most brilliant people. We're putting out 2 to 3 shows a day, people. 14 years we're going on and over 1,400 podcasts. What more do I need to do to entertain you people? She's the author of the latest book that came out August 2nd, 2021. Elaine Broun is on the show with us today. Her new book, I'm going to try and say this with a Spanish accent, Carrasco 67, a harrowing tale of an imperialistic pig. It might be a biography of me. Did I say that right, Elaine? Did I get the Spanish lingo there?
You're very close. You're very close.
Give me a correction so I have it right.
It's Carrasco 67.
Carrasco 67. There we go. Elaine is with us on the show. As you can tell, she's there in the background. She's going to be joining us, and evidently people are already messaging me. They're excited to hear from her. Elaine is a wife, mother of 4, and grandmother. She has lived in many different countries, speaks several languages, loves to travel, read, collect antiquities, and presently lives in Texas. She's always been fascinated by people and how their life journey influenced them as a person. That's why we do the show, because I love that too. I'm always like asking people, like, what made you and what was the journey you went on and what did you learn? And thereby our audience is smarter from their lives. She traveled as a child all over the world. She saw sites such as the ruins of Machu Picchu in Peru, the Mayans in Mexico. I mispronounced that, didn't I? That's why you're laughing.
Machu Picchu.
No, I flunked kindergarten. She climbed through
keeping a straight face on that one too.
I flunked kindergarten. And my teacher didn't like me. I mean, what teacher does like me anyway? She's been through the catacombs of a 14th century church in Brazil. Her love of history was introduced to her by her father, and she shares it together with him to this date. Welcome to the show, Elaine. How are you?
Hi, good. Thank you.
There you go. I'm excited to have you on the show, and already people are tuning in, just giving some love. So that's awesome. We love it. So give us your .com so people can find you on the interwebs, please.
So it's ElaineBroun.com is my website. You can also, find the book on Amazon, and it should be online now on Barnes and Noble, but don't hold me to that. There's been some issues on that one, but we're trying to get it all resolved. So
yeah, it's always a fight to deal with some of the off brands
Oh yeah.
They're like, we want your cover different than the other covers, and you're like, why can't we get all on the same page on this one? It's kind of
Right.
like those plugs for electricity. You go over to Europe and you're like, can't you just all agree on something? But I mean, the French and their cheese. What are you going to do? Tell us a little bit about your origin story. What motivated you to want to write this book? And I believe this is your first book as well, isn't it?
Yes, it is my first novel, and then which is based on a true story. And I'm currently working on my second one that'll be out in fall of 24 is what it's slated to be. Basically, the story was knowing the family and
Oh,
back when. It was something that we knew about, it was touched on, but it wasn't allowed to be talked about, so to speak.
mm,
It was
mm.
something that I always wanted to tell the story. And so it took years. Let's put it that way. It took years to get Peter Gray to even talk about it.
Mm.
And then it would be little snippets. So I would run home and I'd jot down. I tried desperately to remember everything he said. And then, another time if I'd be visiting something, I would try and hit him up down the road to get a little more information. I'd run home and write it. And I just kept doing that. And finally, after about 5 years of this, I had quite a notebook established, and I just point blank said, what do I have to do to be able to tell this story?
Wow.
What I said, I promise you everything. I won't, and I kind of got shut down again, and then I brought it up again, and because I was a little stubborn here, and I knew it was a great story.
Yeah. So set this up for us. This book is historical fiction. Is that what we call it?
I guess you could say that, but 90% of the book is exactly what happened.
Okay, there you go.
So, it is, there, obviously I wasn't in the room with the terrorists. Yeah. So,
Well, yeah. I mean,
but
most historians aren't in the room.
Right. So, once I got Peter on board to allow me to write the story, you're talking about massive amounts of sit down interview, phone calls. And I would let him know, hey, I don't care what time of the night. And trust me, I got a few of those phone calls at 11:30 night. Hey, I remembered something. And I went, okay. I would keep a notebook by my bed, and I would sit there and jot down. And in fact, there were a couple of things that came up when I was ready to go to press, and I was like, oh God, and so, well, not quite press, but you know what I mean? We were ready to go. And so I knew it was important to put in the storyline. So I had to rework it back in, got that information in. You're trying to keep the timeline all as it happened. And so it just worked out. But the thing was, I ended up, having to write the book under a pen name.
Okay.
I'm okay with that. I'll do that. But that was a headache getting every different faction on board, because they want your name, not your pen name, when you're trying to set up accounts and
that's right.
So, it was a challenge. And
there you go. So let me ask you this. Let's flesh this out some more. How old are you when you first come across the story? Where are you at? What is the setting to this? So we can kind of get a contextual feel for that.
The story came back in the 60s. So I was very close to the children of the family. So that's kind of where that came about. So And what was your next question on that one?
I'm just trying to paint a picture of like how old were you? Where was this at? What country are you in?
We
What
were in
setting?
Uruguay. We
In
were in
Uruguay.
Uruguay.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So we got to know the family and very well, and um, it ended up being one of those things where it's absolutely mind blowing on, as you know, you're dealing with your own turmoil with what's going on in the country at the time.
Mhm.
So, and then not to mention what's going on with the family. And so over the years, I wanted this story to be told, but, as I got older and really sunk in and was be able to really absorb everything, and you see the stories that are out there, the stories that you read, I've always been an avid reader. And so, um, that was, it just kept resonating back that this is something that needs to be told. And then not to mention, um, the, Paula Gray, which was his wife, she used to tell me one thing repeatedly, all over and over, and that was, um, no one will ever know who I am, but I want them to know my story. I
There
want
you
them
go.
to know what we went through.
There you go. So
So,
give us a 30,000-foot overview of the book, and let's start with that.
okay. So basically, Peter Gray had come from Brazil and moved to Uruguay, and to take over, being a partner and leader of one of the biggest branches um, in Uruguay. And he worked for a company that was internationally one of the top 2 accounting firms in the world. He was basically their golden child, so to speak. He was one of the youngest men in their profession that had ever risen to the level that he had, and the power that he had at that point. And so he was very respected. And the he and his wife were just, I hate using this term, but they truly were the power couple of that their little world, so to speak. They were very well received. They were very well known. They were absolutely a handsome couple. I mean, that is not understated at all. So they just had a natural way that people just liked them. He was very unique for his role. He was extremely respectful to employees, to women, which is unheard of. A lot of men are just, back in those days where it was very much the macho mentality. And so for him to come over and show respect, boy, he had people all over that company just, loving him. So, so back to the point, he set off to get different clients, important clients. And he was working with another company and had invited one of the CEOs over. And he came to his office and he noticed a guy that was working for Peter. And so he just waited. Peter didn't think much of it. And he went back to his office and gave him a call and said, I want you to come to my office tomorrow. And I need to talk to you. So he ended up going there the next day thinking they were going to be discussing business and all that. And then that's when it opened up. He goes, how well do you know that man that I pointed out to you? And he goes, well, he's had great references. He's been working with us for a while. And he that's when he threw the, that bombshell on him and said, he's a Tupamaru.
Oh, what is that?
And that is the urban gorilla.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. They were in that, he was a full-blown terrorist. They courted them starting in college, most of these guys, and even women too. And because they wanted intellectual people that could move into different companies, all factions, from the police department, doctors, lawyers, you name it. They wanted somebody in all factions that had that leftist mentality. And so they would court them. They would infiltrate. They would make money for the cause. They would make their own salary, but then they would also find out all the back ends and snoop, and then they would start embezzling people.
Extorting and stuff like that.
Right. So he went back and talked to his company lawyers, and they advised him. Now, I did it a little different in the book, but they advised him to observe him for a while. And so that's when at that time, Peter knew something was up, but he couldn't put his finger on it, but he was getting close. And then that was the defining moment, was realizing through this conversation with the other gentleman that this was what was happening. So he started pulling all the accounts and doing his research, and he saw that this was going on, and so he fired him.
Wow.
And then the nightmare started.
Sounds like that scene in Casino where the dude fires it's not the same, but you remember how he fires the nephew of I don't know, whoever runs the gaming board or whatever?
Yeah.
Like, do you know who my dad is? But that's a whole different level of stuff that goes on in these South American countries. I mean,
right.
There's kidnappings, murder, extortion, all that sort of crazy stuff. You mentioned one of the bylines on the Amazon pages. Evil has eyes everywhere. Is someone watching you? I guess he finds that he's kind of surrounded by these people.
Yes. And they were everywhere. And that's why the everyday person there was afraid, even though it was their own country, because they never knew if they were going to get caught in the crossfires of something. There was, originally this started, their group, the Tupamaros, evolved from wanting to help the underdog. And so it did start out as a liberal group wanting to help your everyday poor person and this sort of thing. But as they were rising to power, for lack of better description, they ended up becoming greedier. And then as in every faction that you have, that where people are a little bit off, you'll have those that have more violent tendencies, and it ended up becoming morphing into an extremely violent situation. Now, their tactics for kidnapping and things, people wonder, well, why wasn't there a lot of shooting and this and that and the other? Well, they got into the hobby of bombing things. That was pretty big, I would think. Yeah, just a little bombing, like
just a little hobby.
Alley, where kids were there all the time, those sorts of things. But they wanted to remain anonymous, so they didn't want to put themselves out. If you're out there shooting and doing all these things, you're bringing a lot of attention. What they're wanting to do is continue working undercover, so to speak, and stealing and from various things, and also making money off of ransoms. So if you're letting yourself be known, you're not going to be able to do these tactics.
That's true.
Yeah, so they tried to go undercover, so to speak, all the time on everything. So with this family, it immediately became that mental torture.
Wow.
And that was one of the things they did. They tried to break people down. And so a lot of things that went behind the scenes for different factions were scare tactics. And they would break people down. They would get them exhausted, not allowing them to sleep at night, trying to mess with them, get them so scared that they would end up just caving and giving people what they wanted, or, or giving up on whatever stance they had,
There you go. Well, what do you feel was really drew you to the story, and what do you feel makes it so compelling for readers?
The compelling thing is, everybody sees those dramatic movies where it's, a little bit incredulous on a lot of things, but then other points can be but we're very complacent in our day-to-day lives here in the US. We don't see those, things going on around you. And yet things like this really happened. And it happens in a lot of countries. And these stories don't get out primarily because people are afraid. And they're afraid for their family members. They don't want, so they choose to keep these, stories quiet. In this family, they had one person that helped them out tremendously. And he's probably, besides the dog, the only real name in the book that I put was Dan Mitrione. And God, that guy had a incredible background. He immigrated from Italy to the U.S. He did everything. He was a police officer. He was in CIA. He was in the FBI, that sort of thing.
Wow.
That's kind of what got him overseas in the Latin American countries, because of all the, without getting, heavy into too much boring data here. There was a lot starting in Cuba. Everybody kind of knows what was going on in Cuba, going on in Bolivia, all the unrest and all that sort of thing. So there was a lot of guerrilla tactics that needed to be suppressed. And hence, here comes Dan Mitrione. He was down there in South America to teach counterinsurgency techniques to the police. And in a straightforward message was torture techniques for interrogation was actually what he did. And so it wasn't a pretty thing, but at the time it was necessary. And the Tupamaros were, they had it down to a system where only the head person knew who the head person of the next level. And there was usually, they had cells is what they called them. And there was like 7 people per cell. And there were usually 2 people running that group of 7. So those 2 didn't know who each other were, but the head guy did. So that way, if they were caught, it stopped there. They couldn't find out who the next. So the 7 that were in that cell didn't know who each other were. So it was very clever how they were able to pull off all of this. So it was one of those things where when you get in a mindset of pluralistic people, you're dealing with a whole breed that your normal everyday person doesn't know how to deal with. And so this family just was in a middle of a crapshoot. I hate saying that, but that's probably the best way to say it. They weren't prepared for what was ahead of them. And so Dan Mitrione came into the faction and spoke at some men's event for international businessmen. And so Peter Gray ended up reaching out to him and saying, hey, this is what's going on. And their relationship grew. and Dan took a personal role in helping this family out.
There you go. There you
So,
go. So it's quite interesting story. I mean, I remember I had one gal who worked for me, and her father had been one of the ambassadors to one of the South American countries, and the stories that she would tell me that would go on there with the leftist gangs and stuff, the leftist terrorists, leftist guerrillas, were extraordinary. I mean,
yeah.
one time the Secret Service whisked them away from a mall, and as they were driving away, things started blowing up behind them.
Wow.
They would tell me about how the elite people or the rich or the government people who run the government, they have special schools that have like ultra security to them and other things. And yeah, it's crazy what goes on there. And then security wise, and yeah, I mean, things can go downhill and the stuff's all around you. So it's kind of a tight adventure. This is what drew you to the story? What first piqued your interest in it? What made you go, I really want to talk about this?
Well, what peaked was flat out the insane events that they were going through. I mean, he, like back to Dan, he's the one that said, "Hey, you need to carry a gun on you," and so he hooked them up with a gun, and then he
Wow.
started showing them how to carry himself, how to look out for anything. So those sorts of things, I'm a big fan of action films and all that stuff. So I love all that sort of thing. And so he had been in the Brazilian army, so he knew his way around guns, but that wasn't his everyday life. He was a businessman. So Dan ended up hooking up with stuff, and then he realized you need more. You need it in all corners of your house, so that way you can get to them. So over time, he gave them more, and then he got the police involved, and then the family got what it was, the Tupamaro's death sentence.
Wow.
And they let them know that before he got home, all his family would be dead. And so when that happened, in fact, if you read the opening of the story, was the culminating scene of him reaching out to his wife, because there wasn't time to get anyone to help or anything. He had to get his wife out of the house, get his children from the school, and he was too far away. So she was the closest one. And so that's kind of where it all went down. And then between Dan and the police, they got the police involved. And over time, it got so bad that then the Uruguayan military had to take over the protection of the family. So you've got guards in the house, surrounding the house, on your roof. Everybody ended up first it was just Peter that had a bodyguard, but then they ended up giving bodyguards to every family member. And it just kept escalating, with all the things, and the kidnapping attempts started.
Oh, wow.
So you're dealing where he was on full-blown foot chases, where he's running and darting through traffic, doing like you do in the movies, where one time he kind of half rolled over the hood of a car because he was trying to get away. So it was this story was just absolutely entrancing. And the more he opened up and told me things that I only knew a very little part of it, but I knew it was interesting, and it always stayed with me. But speaking with Peter and what I call the interviews and talking. And when he opened up and told us what really he experienced and went on, it was absolutely mind blowing. And it was one of those things where he ends up being told in the end that once they got out of Uruguay, never to speak of it again to anyone, not even amongst each other.
Mhm.
Because at that time, the Tupamaros did, if someone got away, there was an arrogancy to all of this. They were going to keep looking for you
Mhm.
to get back at you. So it was such a fear that, like, at this point in today's time, I'm thinking all the key parties are either dead or in their 90s, as Peter Gray is.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking that the turmoil, the fear tactics, perhaps by now, before the grudge would be passed down to the next generation.
Mhm.
But at this point, I don't believe that's going to happen anymore. So
There you go. On the cover, there's an airplane.
right.
Do you want to tease out any insight to that? We want people to buy the book, of course, to be able to read it and find out
Right.
what really happens. But any tease out you want to do to that? And
The tease out was basically it's how they escaped. And they escaped in the middle of the night. They had a convoy that took them out.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm telling you, I mean, they had the streets lined with military watching, and they had it all pre-set up before they removed them from the house. And they actually pushed the cars way out into the main road before they started the motors, just in case someone in the neighborhood was a squeal or a
Wow.
squealer or whatever. They truly didn't. That's how crazy that's how the people were so afraid during those times, because you didn't know your most innocent neighbor could be a Tupamaro.
Yeah.
And
Even the military guys could be, traitors.
yeah, even a maid in the house could
Wow.
be.
Wow.
So,
That's pretty much how I live my life. I have someone who drinks my coffee for me in the morning to test it and stuff. So there you go. But it's pretty much just my 9 ex-wives trying to kill me usually. But I mean, I probably deserve it.
oh God.
There's 7, 8, or 9. We just change it from the callback joke. So anything more you want to tease out on the show, Elaine, to get people to go pick up the book?
Yeah. Basically it is a fast-paced read, and I've had many people assert to that, because it's just it's fluid. It's going. I didn't want something that was choppy. There were many storylines that I wasn't allowed to put in, but because that's how afraid Peter Gray was, even to this point, because he's thinking, I don't want something to happen to my grandkids, or that sort of thing.
Mm.
But it is interesting. There's a lot of detail. I like to write so that when people read, I've always been an avid writer. And so when I write things, I like it to where people picture themselves, that they can really picture themselves being in there.
There you go.
And and then the one thing I had mentioned to you before we went on air, what I was going to say, because I just got permission yesterday.
Oh, wow.
This was my family.
Wow. All right. This is a family tale. First
Mhm.
person.
Mhm.
Wow. This is crazy. So this is why it took a lot of negotiating and
Oh,
trying
yeah.
to tell this tale then. Wow.
I was not allowed to
This
even
makes
bring up
total
the
sense now.
subject. Yeah. I was not allowed to bring up the subject at all. And it was
Wow.
in very curt answers until I was like in high school.
Wow.
We were not allowed. It was, I mean, in fact, I I got in some severe trouble right after we arrived in the U.S. After we escaped. Um, and it was because I brought up the subject because it still bothered me and we hadn't talked about it. We hadn't been able to talk about it. So I brought it up wanting to know why. Why did they hate us? Why did whatever? And my dad never, ever raised his voice to me or yelled at me my entire existence. But that was the one time because I wasn't letting it go because I was curious. And he snapped at me and he said, "We do not speak about it." And he wanted to make sure that I didn't go to school because he had been warned by Dan that they know we have family in Dallas. And of course, we came and we stayed with family. And so he didn't want, in case they infiltrated to anybody's surroundings. We didn't want to slip or say anything wrong, but
amazing, harrowing story.
yeah.
Hey, do you remember the escape? How old were you when that happened? When you
Yeah, I
evacuated?
was turning 7 at the time, and I've got one of these weird identic type memories. I remember things back to when I was 1, which is really weird. And maybe that's what plays a part in me being so fascinated by people and details and things, because there was very little that I didn't remember in detail, except for what my father experienced.
Yeah.
Or, what happened when I was at school. That was where I really had to delve in. And I was relentless because I knew this story was incredible.
Yeah. Story of
And
your family too. It's your
right.
history. Yeah.
And my mother sadly passed away last year. But the biggest joy for me was she was the number one person that wanted our book written. And she knew I was a writer. And so one day out of the blue, I said, "I'm going to write our story." And I said, "And I'm going to hold on to it until he allows me to publish it." So I started, and that's where I started writing all the notes down, and I would, bug them and I would so I was working on it. So from the time I told her that until the time it was published, it was 10 years.
Oh, wow.
So it was more effort and that's why this story is so tight. And that's what I've been told by so many people that have read it, is that they're amazed at the intensity in there, that you can feel the intensity in the story. But it was that intense. I mean, they almost kidnapped me at one point myself. So it and sadly, Dan was murdered a few months after we left. And
Oh, wow.
yeah, so he was caught. So
There you go. So extraordinary story. I imagine growing up, one of the reasons this was prevalent in your mind, correct me if I'm wrong, but you're feeling the tension in your family. You don't maybe understand fully what's going on. You don't have the bigger picture. And of course you're a
yeah.
child, but you can feel the tension. You can
Oh
feel that
yeah.
there's something going on. You're just like, why is everybody kind of on pins and needles or wound up? And that's probably why it made a real difference in you. And
Yeah.
of course, probably a lot of that emotion and tension translated into the story to kind of create this historical thriller
Right.
of your family. So quite extraordinary. Anything more final thoughts you want to?
Well, it's
tease out
not
before we go?
normal for a kid to look out the window and watch them checking the guards checking for bombs under your dad's car
Yeah.
to start your day. Those sorts of things. To watch your dad packing his gun, to all those things that just totally blow away your innocence and your sense of security. And so there's a lot to be had with the story. I hope everyone enjoys it. It was a labor of love. And I've I'm hoping something will come of it one day. I would like to see it on the screen. My mother wanted that, and if I have it on one producer's desk, but I'm one of many, so
Yeah.
it can be there for a long time. You never know, but maybe one day.
There you go.
So
Maybe one day. These movies always make for fun.
yeah,
People love watching, these sort of things, tension, thrillers, et cetera, et cetera.
yeah.
Elaine, it's been wonderful to have you on the show.
Thank
Give
you.
us your .com so people can find you on the interwebs, please.
It's ElaineBrown.com. And so that's my pen name. And so this book will be interlaced with that for a long time. But Elaine, is my middle name, and Brown was a misspell on my maiden name. So
Oh, there you go.
that was kind of where that came. I wanted it to be still a part of me. So that was where that came from. So, but my dad is in the 90s. He's doing great. He's still active. Sadly, he's sad because he lost the love of his life, but he's very proud of this book. He's still very leery about me going live saying who I am, but hopefully no hard feelings.
No hard feelings. There you go.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, Elaine, for coming on the show.
All
We
right.
really
Thank
appreciate it.
you.
Thanks to our audience for tuning in. Be sure to order up her book. Give me the title one more time so that it
It's
sounds better when
Carrasco 67, A Harrowing Tale of an Imperialist Pig. And
there
you'll
you go.
find out what the meaning behind the Imperialist Pig is when you read the book. It'll make sense.
There
So
you go. There you go. So order up, folks, wherever fine books are sold. Go to goodreads.com/Chris Voss, youtube.com/Chris Voss, linkedin.com/Chris Voss. Subscribe to the big newsletter over there, the 103,000 group over there. See us on TikTok. We're trying to be cool over there. It's slowly working. We're cutting up bits of the show and sending it over there slowly. So I don't know. Enjoy whatever the hell goes on over there. I think we're giving away a copy of my book over there. So you might want to check that as well. An autograph copy. Anyway, thanks for tuning in. Be good to each other. Stay safe. We'll see you guys next time.